Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to yet another uLaw webinar. In today's webinar, we're going to be talking about the document as well as the court form automation features of the uLaw product. And we're going to discover the different types of court forms that we automate, how do you accomplish it, the relationship that we build between, say, a contact within your contacts panel and the matter within uLaw, and how that relationship then further allows you to use them as additional parties, and the use of additional parties then results in uLaw being able to provide you anywhere from a 75–80% to sometimes even a 95–100% filling of court form information, which is traditionally name, address, and people information. Okay. We're also going to start, based on availability of time. We'll also look at other types of documents that we automate in filling, whether that's a Form 9A that we auto-populate with information, whether that's other related client documents. We're going to quickly look at how we automate the filling of those documents as well. Now, today's webinar is not accredited for any CPD credits, so it's going to be yet another demonstrable session where I demonstrate the product to you as well as the salient features, and especially today we'll cover the court forms and the document management or the document automation. Okay. So kindly do use the chat window as always to ask your questions. Both our support staff and myself will be more than happy to answer them as we go along. And for those who joined us today using the computer's audio, I do recommend that you dial in, use the phone number provided in the email that you should have received, because we find the audio quality is definitely better when you dial in using your phone. Okay? So like every other webinar in uLaw, today's webinar has a very specific agenda. So we're going to, as I mentioned, talk about the value addition of court form automation and document generation, what that can bring to your business. We'll talk about some case studies of clients that in certain silos of practice use uLaw today, which really saves them at least about an hour to 2 hours a day. That can increase or decrease based on the amount of documents that you generate, the number of clients that you intake in a week or a month. But you can be assured that the automation feature saves you time and money, obviously, in avoiding not just filling the form one time, but let's say you make a mistake and you need to correct it, you don't have to go retype it again. So gone are the days where you handwrite these court forms and submit them to the court. With automation and with software, just makes your life as a legal professional that much more easier. And we would like for you to take advantage of those features that we provide as a software company. Okay? So what is the value addition? How can it streamline some of the time and important components of your business? As I mentioned earlier on, what is this concept of additional parties? How do you use that within a matter to relate to a contact? And once that relationship has been established, how do the court form features automate the filling? So that's kind of a big session today for us to walk you through. In addition to court forms, as I mentioned, I'll also talk to you about some of the other documents that we automate with information, such as the retainer letters, credit verification, a lot of the client-based documents, I would have to say. Once you've provided us with some basic information about the client as well as what the matter is, a lot of the documents, both for Law Society purposes and also for your own, I would say, client intake process, we do help you with automating those documents. We spoke about Form 9A and also talk about deposit slips and intermatter trust transfer documents as well. Okay, so that's kind of a very set agenda. We want to walk you through the experience of automating court forms and showcasing some of the other documents as well that in your business realm you can actually automate. Okay? Before I actually jump into demonstrating the product in its action, I would again a quick snapshot of some of the court forms that we automate. And this is very specific also to the province of Ontario. So for our friends who are joining in from Alberta, British Columbia, and some other provinces, it's definitely in our roadmap, but we're already working towards automating court forms in your provinces and jurisdictions. But today, we have the court forms in these specific areas for the province of Ontario. So starting with small claims, okay, the Landlord and Tenant Board, POA or the Highway Traffic Act, we have family law forms, criminal forms, accident benefits, tribunals, and WSIB. We're also looking to add, as I said, other areas of practice within the province of Ontario itself. Immigration, some standard set of forms, because there's, immigration by itself can be an ocean, but we're exploring some of the top 15, 20 documents that will be meaningful for our clients. And we're evolving every day based on client feedback and what we learn from the industry. Okay? I'll be sharing this as part of our YouTube channel, so you are more than happy to review our comparison between, let's say, filling out a court form in a manual process compared to the uLaw way. So you'll be more than happy to click it and review it at your own time. A quick 3-minute video. Okay? Perfect. So one of the most important aspects of the court form automation feature within uLaw, one of the fundamental building blocks, is the concept of additional parties. Okay? So each document or court form, let's say, has, as I mentioned, people and contact information and their appropriate addresses, and maybe contact information including phone number, etc. But it certainly would include a name, could be first name, last name, could be the address. So let's take an example of a landlord and tenant board court form. Let's say it's an eviction of a tenant. You obviously would have information about the landlord, and let's assume that you as a legal professional are representing the landlord. In case of a matter, the client is going to be the landlord in this case, right? But if we were to, so let's say we create a client in uLaw, we create a matter for that client. That client, by default, let's assume is the landlord. Then now you have the opportunity to associate the tenant or the tenants. So you could have multiple tenants or just a single tenant. So the concept of associating a contact in relationship to that matter is done through what we call as additional parties. So let's assume that Chris is the client, and we're going to walk you through this demonstration anyways, and let's assume that Mr. Rock is the tenant of Mr. Chris's condo in downtown Toronto, and let's say you're Roger Moore, who's the paralegal. We have the information of Roger, we have the information of Chris, Rock, and even maybe the opposing legal professional. By associating these individual contacts as parties within that landlord and tenant board matter, uLaw quickly recognizes how to automate the information that we've already captured in the appropriate document slots where it's required to be filled out. Okay? The power of that is, let's say you have to make a change. Let's say the address changed. Traditionally, in the manual way, you would have to scratch out that whole form, print another brand new form, rewrite all the information. Okay? With uLaw, you can just make a quick change right from the contacts. Okay? And then go right back into the matter, generate that court form, and uLaw would automatically pick up the most recent information that you've saved, again, saving you that time and money. So some examples of additional parties with relationships, the contacts in a matter could be attention. So if, let's say, you're sending an invoice for a corporate law and you're sending it to the specific clerk or a specific person in the financial office, you can send that invoice by putting an attention. You have, the plaintiff-defendant situation in small claims. You may have health practitioners, insurance companies, etc., with regards to accident benefits. Joint retainers. So you may have a joint retainer situation, even if it's a real estate. So you can add a party as a joint retainer. and then associate them so that appropriate documents, retainer agreements, will all include the names of all the parties involved. Okay, and then we did speak about the landlord and tenant parties. So keep in mind this quick snapshot, and we'll walk you through an example or maybe a couple of examples based on time about how you would associate additional parties with a prerequisite of storing contacts, allowing you to then automate the generation of court forms. And as I mentioned, right now we've certainly established a good number of court forms in the province of Ontario, and we're almost ready to release court forms in British Columbia, followed by Alberta and then Saskatchewan. Okay. And for those who are joining us for the first time, we welcome you, and we also welcome all our clients who have joined us today. For those who don't know us, we are a Canadian legal accounting and practice management software company, and do visit us online at uLawPractice.com. We do offer a no obligation 30-day trial for you to check us out. Okay, so let me shift gears right away. Today's webinar, once again, is not accredited for CPD, but I would highlight or bring to your attention that our CPD for next week, Disbursements Demystified, has been approved for 1 hour of CPD credits in Ontario, British Columbia, and New Brunswick. Okay? So I've logged into my 6 years legal accounting account of Roger Moore. Let's assume Roger Moore is a legal professional. You know, I have my information in the details section. So here's all my information. Roger Moore, my address on 123 Main Street in Brampton, and that's my work address. Okay, so that's one information readily available that you provided us. That's always there. Now you can change this. So let's say change the city, and let's say this is Kingston. You can change that. Automatically, uLaw is now updated with that piece of information. Okay. Now let's go through the process of adding a client. So let's take that first example we spoke about, and let's follow up with the same name. So let's say a landlord and tenant matter, and then we'll maybe do a small claims. As a first step, I'll go into my contacts, and let's say there is Mr. Chris, who is, in front of my law office and wants me to represent him in this landlord and tenant board matter, which is, let's say, the eviction of the tenant for non-payment. Okay. The first thing you do, Roger Moore, is add this information of Chris as a client. So let's say this is Mr. Chris Johnson. I would ask Chris, how did you get to know about my legal office? Maybe I heard it from my family friend. So I could just say, okay, referred by John. And I'll take Chris's address. The Law Society definitely requires you to accept a communication address. So let's put that in. Let's say 189 King Street, Toronto, Ontario. I'll say this is home address. I could put a phone number, email, and you can use that information using our app as well to dial Chris. And you can even take that dialed call as a potential docket in a matter. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and click on Save and create that client record. So here is the second piece of information that uLaw already has. One, Mr. Chris Johnson, who is a client of yours, very recent client intake. Okay. And there you go. Now, obviously, before generating the matter, there are a bunch of documents that you would like to generate, including the conflict screening. You can click on the little action button, do a conflict screening if you like, to make sure it's okay to represent Chris. So I'm going to assume, for the purpose of time today, that it's great to be representing Chris. There's no conflicts, and you're all aware of the documentation that goes behind it. So to create a file, which is really the next logical step, Let's go ahead and click on the Matter button. What this does is it opens up a brand new file or a matter page that allows you to provide a simple title to this matter about what this matter is about. You can put eviction of tenant. Maybe he lives on 80 Queen Street. And you can choose the area of practice. It just so happens it's the landlord and tenant way. You choose the area of practice this matter belongs to for Chris, provided a simple title, and then you click on Save. That creates obviously a file number that's unique. Right away I could start, generating documents. So we spoke about beyond court forms. There are many documents that we generate that are required for sometimes audit purposes as well. So if you go into our document generation panel, this is really how you generate any of the documents in uLaw. Our brand new compliance panel allows you to generate all of these documents that are a big part of the practice management guidelines. So you could do a client ID verification document. And if you were to, let's say, generate that document, here's a great example of one of those business documents. Beyond court forms, these are some of the business documents that uLaw can automate anywhere from, at a minimum about 70% of the information that that form requires. So you don't have to read or handwrite information that you've already provided us. Okay, so you've already provided us Chris Johnson's address, his information. So we would pre-populated that. We pre-populate the date. You don't have to do that. Had you provided his phone number, we would have done that. Okay? So we know what the matter is. So if you generate this file after creating the matter, we also know what the matter is about and a file number for Chris Johnson, CJ. You could say I got a driver's license. You could print this, or you could save this into our Google Drive as well. So that's all documented well within the context of the matter. Okay? Let me just go ahead and save that document. I'll replace it because it's previously saved. And in uLaw, you could go into our documents, which then allows you to connect with either Google Drive, OneDrive, and very soon we'll be starting with Dropbox in the box as well. So let's look at the file number, C21550, and there it is. So kind of drag and drop that particular document that I just saved into my local computer. And likewise, you can start generating all of the client intake documents. So here's a client intake form, which sometimes auditors really like that if you fill out. It's a simple questionnaire that you ask your client about how, their information. So even we looked at how did you hear about us? It's really the source of contact. Maybe you scanned his driver's license. You could say, I got his driver's license. Here's all the information. And you print this, sign this, and technically, again, you can scan this. Let's assume I'm just scanning this form right now. I can once again store it into my cloud if I like. Perfect. So let's assume just, within a couple of minutes of starting your matter, you are now able to generate a client verification document, a client intake document. You can do a full-fledged conflict screening report, okay? Drag and drop that conflict screening report. You can sign up a retainer letter, which is one of the business forms that you obviously would need to get started. So let's assume that this is a flat rate retainer for this landlord and tenant, and you're going to accept let's say, $500 retainer. And you can even generate Word documents and store that on the cloud as well. So let's assume that you've signed retainer letter and you're going to, again, scan in that document. Now, not only can you do that for documents that you've generated in uLaw, you can even do that for documents. Let's assume you've scanned a driver's license. You can just drag and drop a driver's license. Maybe you got a driver's license, scanned it, put it on your computer. You can upload that as well. And as you continue to do that, you come back into uLaw and refresh it. It's all available in a very chronological manner, all within the context of this client, Chris Johnson, for this particular matter, eviction of tenant at 80 Queen Street. Okay? So if you can build this as a bit of a discipline, it really goes a long way, because then each and every document is then made available in a very chronological manner, and you can obviously click on it, and you can open the document right from uLaw as well. So I'm just trying to open up the driver's license just to make sure that the information is available on it and scanned properly. There you go. You've got his driver's license for Mr. Bean. Fantastic. Now let's jump into showcasing to you how the court forms work. So very similar to court forms, as I mentioned, a lot of these other forms, we do automate the information. If you look at our retainer letter, a lot of the information in the retainer letter is also pre-populated, because the retainer letter consists of your information as the legal professional, your client's information, the file information. It talks about, what is this file about? What is the retainer? Many of these pieces of information is already provided to us in those initial steps of client intake and creating that file. So we repurpose all of that data and merge it into these templates that we've created and associate the data in its appropriate places. That's all we've done. It's a patent pending technology for uLaw. We don't have a patent on it yet, but we're in the process of obtaining it. So after this, I'm going to jump into showcasing the court forms, which is one of the bigger aspects of today's webinar. But I also want to show you that the technology exists for us to then extend the capability to pre-populate data or information in forms that are necessary for you to generate and run your business. So instead of having to handwrite this, you're then just having to generate them, having provided the information. I do apologize for the speed of the internet. For some reason, I think my internet is relatively slow today, and I do apologize for that bit of that experience. So let's wait for that retainer letter to generate itself. Let's move on. I'm not going to put any dockets in. I'm not going to put any retainers. I'm not going to put any of disbursements, etc. So I'll kind of stick to the script, which is talking to you about court forms automation. So we know Chris. He's your client. So you obviously going to talk to Chris and find out, all right, who is this tenant, what is his contact information, so that you can send all the appropriate documents. So let's assume Chris says, this is Mr. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and let's add that information first. A big prerequisite is to add that contact or that people record, if you will, with the uLaw. Okay, so we'll say add new contact. And Mr. Dwayne Johnson is obviously not a client. But in your legal life, he comes across, at least for now, as a tenant. Okay? You can add him to the tenants group. You can say, and you can even actually give him a rock, the nickname the rock. And let's put the address that he's living in, and hopefully that's the address of the unit that's being discussed. You could have multiple addresses always. Okay? So let's say the communication address is for 80 Queen Street in Toronto. Let's make that the home address, and let's save this contact information one time. So if you provide this one time of Mr. Dwayne Johnson, then obviously I'm going to show you how you would repurpose and associate that individual Dwayne in the context of a matter. Okay? So now I've saved that contact. It's going to bring up with a capital D the information Dwayne Johnson. So this is step one, is ensuring the contacts are pre-populated with the information, name, address, right? Very simple. Now let's go back to our Chris matter that we were working on. And if you look at this particular tab called Additional Parties in this matter, let's click on it. Right now there are no parties listed in the context of this matter, and let's do that. Let's add a party. And here are some types, party types that we've provided you with. In the context of this matter, we're looking specifically for a tenant. You type T, brings you to tenant. And now, the fact that you have already stored this information of this tenant before, you can now search for it. I'll say Dwayne Johnson. Now what uLaw does is it associates Dwayne Johnson. Let's hope that's the same guy. Yep, same guy. It's associated Mr. Dwayne Johnson, aka Rock, at 80 Queen Street as a tenant in this landlord and tenant board matter, which is for eviction. Now another potential contact that you may want to add as a party is Mr. Dwayne's legal representative. Yeah? You know, sometimes you may have that information up front, sometimes you may not. You can always add it if you have to regenerate forms. So let's assume we do know that information. If you notice in uLaw, there's already, again, a section called representatives, or a group called representatives, and there are these different representatives. So let's say Monica Chandler. Let's assume Monica Chandler is legal representative. You already come across and you've dealt with Monica before, maybe in another file where she was your opposing representative. That information is stored that you can now repurpose. So you go back to this matter, you find out that it's Monica, and you're like, damn, it's Monica. I've dealt with her before. I know her information. You just add the party, and you say, all right, I know the opposing party is representative. So I'm going to say representative of the opponent is Monica Chandler. We'll just search for her information again. Just type in the name, M-O-N-I-C-A, and there it is. Associated, click Save. And what that does, as it says, saving the additional parties, it saves Monica Chandler as, oops, I don't know why I put this as caregiver. That's good. I can show you how you can edit it and change it if you ever make a mistake. Okay, so because the internet is a bit of a, oh, there you go. So if you want to change let's say the party association. Let's say Monica is not really the caregiver. You just say edit item, change the party, I'll probably say unlock first, change the party, change that to representative, the opponent. So representative, the opponent. I'll say unlock. And I'll hit save. Okay, so now you've got two parties associated with this particular matter. You've got a tenant, Mr. Dwayne Johnson, and Dwayne's representative, Monica Chandler. All right, you've got four pieces of information. So you've got Chris Johnson's information. You have your own information, Roger Moore. You've got tenant. You could have multiple tenants, and each tenant could have his or her own representative, or say Monica could be representing both those tenants. So that's possible too, in which case you would just add an additional tenant as well. You would just say add party, add a second tenant, and then maybe choose another name that you've already saved in your contacts. So let's say it's Brian Henry or something like that. Okay? And once you've done that, you would use our document generation. This is really where the recipe is. Right at the bottom of the document generation menu option is where you see the court forms, or we call it forms. Probably should rename it to court forms, which we will. And here's where you see the different areas of practice or silos for which we audit court forms. From small claims, landlord and tenant, POA, HTA, everything that we just saw in our initial slide, WCIB, SABs, right? Let's choose landlord and tenant board. And when you choose that area of practice, then you are provided with, we update this court form as soon as it updates on the court website. We update it within less than 2 weeks. That's our key performance indicator. Within 2 weeks, we should be able to do it. So we wanted this was an application to evict a tenant. Let's say that's the first court form. If there's a claim number, you can put that in as well. And you would hit the download button. Now, as you probably already appreciate, each silo of practice, each court form does come up in its own style, because there are certain documents that are in Word. There are certain documents such as landlord and tenant, which are in PDF. These are editable PDF forms. And we provided it to you in the same, very similar, edit-friendly PDF. So you could basically say, did you give the tenant a NF4 notice? You can say yes. Are you applying, is the tenant still in possession? Yes. Have you included the copy? Did you name each tenant? Yep. Did you fill in the complete address? uLaw does it. Did you check your map? Now this is something you may have to check based on the situation. Did you date it? Yes. You can say yes to all of that. And when you come down, we obviously have the rental unit that's being covered. You can put in there. This, again, an edit-friendly PDF that you can always type. And very important is the landlord's name. So if this is your client, we populate this information. Chris Johnson. He lives at 189 King Street, Toronto, Ontario. Tenant names. So there are multiple tenants. You would obviously see them in tenant 2. You've got Dwayne Johnson, which we pre-populate. uLaw does the pre-population for you, so you don't have to type it in. But if you can always change the information here. You type in junior if you like. The mailing address being the same as the rental unit. And that's pretty much it. So we pre-populate as much as it makes sense for the particular form and the information that it requires based on information you've already provided us. Okay? You could say, I'm applying for an order, what he owes me. That's $2,000 per month. And last but not least, here's information about, I will, speak out a little bit louder. Hope this is better. And here's the information about the representative, Mr. Roger Moore, my address. And you can basically then add any other piece of information you like in this particular form. So we'll go about, I would say about 80%, about 75 to 80% of this core form was pre-populated. Most important, some of these are repetitive pieces of information. So imagine this, if you were to just handwrite this, and then suddenly learned that something changed, either in the address information or something changed with the name, then you would have to scrap that paper, handwrite this, retype this, right? So let's assume it was actually not 189 King Street, it's 188 King Street. That is Chris Johnson's address. All you do is you make that change in one place, right? So you go Chris, it's a simple change. You basically go to Chris Johnson's. It's not 189, it's 188 King Street. You've saved it. Fantastic. So you go back to Chris's matter, any of his matters. Okay. And let's try regenerating that form once again, which is really a click of a button. Interestingly enough, if you do put the court file number or the claim number right within the matter, we automatically populate that as well. All right, let me download this updated information and the updated court form. And there you go. There's the updated information right away. Okay? Let me take another example, maybe create another matter for Chris, or this could be another client, but just for purposes of time, let me just let's take an example of a small claims matter. I'm going to say new matter. And let's say this is the all-famous fence issue. So I'm going to say this is Chris. It's always the tough part is to really find out a name. So I'm going to say same names. Chris was Dwayne. Okay, just for simplicity. Call it a small claims matter. Same thing, just like the previous file, you're just labeling a new matter for what it is in the context of that file. It's the same concept. You're going to add these parties. But it's important that just because you added Dwayne previously in a landlord and tenant board, it does not automatically pick it up for the small claims matter, because uLaw, just like the Law Society requires, does maintain each matter file separately on its own, even if it's for the same client. So if you notice, it's actually a different file number as well. So it's the same client, Chris Johnson. But if you look at the file number, it's the same initials, but the file number is different, which is unique, just cross-indexable, and you can see there are two files for Chris. One was eviction, the other one was the defense issue. So quickly, let's do the same thing. Let's add a party. We know so let's assume again, we need to be cognizant of whether Chris is the plaintiff or whether Chris is the defendant in this small claims matter. So let's assume that that you're representing the plaintiff, Mr. Chris, in which case the other party would be let's say a defendant, and that would be the appropriate party name. And let's search for Dwayne. Let's get the same information. We'll save that. Now let me add the add party again. And let me just change the representative. Instead of Monica, I'll say for in this case it was someone else. So let's say this was Stefan Edberg. I'm going to add him as the paralegal or lawyer in this case, the legal representative of Mr. Dwayne in this particular small claims matter. Now that you added this information, let's go back into document generation, the same menu structure, forms, but instead of the landlord and tenant board forms, we'll do the small claims forms. Okay? And now if you recognize real quick, the forms are obviously different. These are what the court forms that are provided to you in your court website. Each side of practice has its own website with its court forms updated. And here you see the different set of small claims courts. And let's say we're doing a plaintiff's claim, as simple as that. You can, again, in this case, you can choose the courthouse. So let's say you go to the Ottawa courthouse. We pre-populate that address information. It's on 161 Elgin Street. Once again, you can the court file number, or you can update it right when generating the form. And you can tell us whether the plaintiff is the creditor and if the defendant is the debtor himself. Or if it's reversed, you can tell us what that particular relationship is as well. Choose the date and hit download. Now, as I mentioned, the landlord and tenant board was a PDF. This, in case, was a Word document. And look at how much uLaw can auto-populate pieces of information that you otherwise would have had to handwrite. So it's got the address of the courthouse. It's got the claim number. It's got the address, the plaintiff, pre-populated. Right? So here's, and you can have, once again, you can have multiple plaintiffs. Chris Johnson, Toronto, Ontario, and you can always update this, right? Here's the representative's information, Mr. Roger Moore, his information. There it is, Dwayne Johnson. It also copies over the AKA name, also known as name The Rock. Got the address. You can expand on this by saying Ontario if you like. So what uLaw does is gives you a head start with populating this document that you can then retype every time. And then if there's minor adjustments that you would have to make, it's just simpler to do it from a starting point. And if you've got Stefan's LSUC number, you can put that in as well. Okay? And if you were to check these, just a little tip, you can always double click these check boxes, check them, and make them to 10 points. That would give you that little X box perfectly. And you print this and you file this in the court. Okay? And before I jump into maybe another style of practice, here's the retainer letter that we were looking at for the 80 Queen Street matter that we did earlier on, Chris, for the landlord and tenant board. It's got all this information pre-populated, merged. So from the office of Mr. Roger Moore, and this is just another template. This is one of those flat rate templates that we used. You can choose your own templates from the varieties of templates that we offer. If you have your own template, you can also send it to us, and we do help templatize it and make it available in the product. So you've got the fees. So if you look at the retainer that we put in, it's automated that information as well. And all you do is you sign, you have customer sign it, and you're pretty much done. So this is a very simple, another example of automation that saves you time. Likewise, so we looked at landlord and tenant and small claims. So you could also do a POA, notice of intention to appear maybe. And that also is a Word document. So it, again, pre-populates whatever information that we know. Okay. So very simple, almost fills 100% of the information here. And you can also include the offense number when you do have it. Okay, so writer forms is where you have all these different silos. One of the most recent ones are family and criminal. So a form one is a very a quick question is about the template itself, whether when you provide it to us, it's available to everyone. The actual answer is yes, it is available to everyone because it's then made part of the product. But having said that, if there are, whatever document you provide us, we templatize it. We remove your name, we remove your client's name. It's only the English and I would say the style, choice of words that we retain. But any private information is not taken over to the other clients. Again, if there are any specific documents that you think are missing, do email us at support@uLawPractice.com, and we'll be more than happy to right away look into it and respond back. But I hope those two answered the question. So as part of our roadmap, we are building what we call a document or a template editor, which would then allow you to edit documents in real time and save it within uLaw. So it's definitely something that our clients have asked for after we've finalized the app. So we've done a good level of investment in building the app at this stage, so you can go check out the uLaw app both on Android and iOS. Our next big is getting into the document templatization, Dropbox, and the box. That's a good question. If you don't intend sharing it, then unfortunately the templatization may not work, so you would have to look at the different samples and I guess find a way to edit those documents in a very minimalistic way. So for example, if you have, from a uLaw standpoint, if you've got retainer letter, you've got a simple, elaborate, flat rate, so there's 3 styles right there. And then under letters, you have hourly samples, which you can also generate in MS Word. And that's why we give you the option to generate these in MS Word. That makes it easier for you to edit them based on the situation. We've got contingency samples. Yeah, you can always have your document open, just that header section, if you will, and just copy paste it. Absolutely. So let's say this is your original template. You can just, till we get the document templatization done, you can just do this. If this, maybe it's the first section, that's all that's missing, right? So one thing, obviously, it's a retainer letter, but a good aspect to the automation also is with regards to all of the compliance documents where the given document template is fixed. It's governed by the Law Society. They provide you with these guidelines, and there's already a good template that's established. So many of the merits of the current technology that we have is to populate those documents. But as we develop that particular technology now to give you the flexibility to add and edit by yourself using this, what we call template editor, we hope that will be available to you by end of the year. Okay, so I'm going to quickly answer for additional parties. So let's say in the case of the small claims, so I'm going to just try and add this party. That's a good question. So I mean, we can send you. So what I'll do is it's an offline question that I would again take it offline, have us respond back to you via email about how you can actually fix that issue. We've heard that before. It's a fairly simple fix. It's almost not an issue at all. It's just understanding of how you add these parties. Yeah, the question I think that was asked was specifically about how do we add multiple parties, which sometimes doesn't seem to work, as it only adds one at a time. In Form 1A of small claims. I'm just going to try and print Form 1A right now. Which basically has the second defendant that I added, right? Because the first defendant is part of the original document of the form, the plaintiff's claim. Perfect. So we'll make sure we thank you. Perfect. Just as a quick summary once again, we looked at how we use the uLaw's court forms automation as well as document automation technology to not only auto-populate court forms, but take advantage of populating some of the Law Society compliance documents right from client intake. We looked at right when you do a client intake, the different types of compliance documents that you can automate, store it on the cloud, make it simple and easy for you to generate data letters. As we continue to build on our template editor, it's only going to get easier for you to edit this and tweak it and have your own set of versions for it without having to share it. But in the intermediate, please do have a look at the templates that we do offer. And by generating them in MS Word, you're obviously able to tweak them on the fly based on the specific customer situation. And then we looked at the court forms that we automated, which again, you can throw it into your set of documents that you have generated for this client. Right? Once it's signed, scanned, and available as a copy, it's always a great habit to store them online. We spoke about the different silos of forms, the different styles, whether it's PDF, Word document, and how you use the additional parties section within a matter to associate contact information that you've previously stored and associate them as parties, and then use that information, and how uLaw uses that information rather, to populate many of the court forms that are available in the province of Ontario. Okay? At this time, I guess that's all we had for the presentation. I would again open up the floor for any other additional questions. To those very specific questions from our clients, we would most certainly get back to you with the personalized email, which is then taken offline. But in the context of today's session, if there's any additional questions, our support staff and I would be more than happy to answer that. Okay? Thank you once again, and we'll look forward to hearing your questions. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I know it's a long weekend, so once again, thank you very much for participating in our webinar today, and wish you and your family a fantastic long weekend, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, which is 1-hour CPD on, I believe it's disbursements demystified, is it? That's it. So we'll look forward to seeing you at our next webinar next Friday. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful long weekend.